from farms to the fork. He has earlier been the talent acquisition head. He has already also been in the talent management and job evaluation for auto, tractor, and the agri business of Mahindra and Mahindra. He loves reading. He loves meditation, traveling, photography, and his footballer by his hobbies. I'll leave the panel to without taking much of your time. I'll shoot the questions. I'll get Ganesh. I think we're missing Ganesh, who was the moderator for the panel, so we'll take it further. Sumedh, my first question goes to, rather, we'll just start with the session. Sumedh, I just wanted to check, Sumedh and Prince, my question to you was, how do you look at the talent acquisition space now? And I'm sure you would have had your plans by end of the March for the coming year. What does it look like, and how is it impacted on the overall talent acquisition space for the overall sector, and how do you look at it emerging? Time. Yes, Sumedh.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
Talking about talent acquisition. Okay, may I?
Yes, please.
Talking about talent acquisition space, I think for us, I for the first instance would like to clarify this, that this is not going to be a war between India versus Bharat. So that's a disclaimer. I think so-called India survives because we have a huge Bharat backing it up. So that remains reality of this particular space. So with that disclosure and humble admission, I would say that if I have to talk about the space that I represent here for the discussion purpose today, and that is the IT part of the world, I think nothing much, if you really ask me, has changed from the status quo. And that could be probably a non-traditional response that the audience might have experienced. This is for a fact that we have thoroughly believed that you can't become Atmanirbhar by giving a slogan overnight. Part one. And part number two, if you have to be Atmanirbhar, then you have to start when you are in good times. Well, the calamities do have huge impact on every business model and any business function that serves the business, including talent acquisition. If you have to be prepared for today and tomorrow, you have to invest in your past. So keeping that context in mind, at least in the IT space, speaking specifically for TCS, we were already well prepared. I don't think this particular pandemic has really jolted us in a big way. Working from home was always a norm. It's just that we have never done it on a scale that we're doing it now. It's just because the pandemic has forced us to do. Exactly the same way, talent acquisition space was fully digital for years together now, for TCS at least. So we have a slogan which was given way back by our ex-CEO, Mr. N. Chandrasekharan, who is now the chairman of the Tata Group. Some 7 years back, when he told us, looking into the future, that TCS wants to move into something called default is digital. He said, if we have to get ready for ourselves in future, for us, default is digital. And that happened 7 years back. And then is when we all decided to move all our policies, processes, and systems. So for me, to answer your question in short, since the journey has started way back in the past, we are reaping the fruits today. And hence for me, at least in talent acquisition space, before pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic, I don't see much of a sea change. Yes, but technology is all pervasive, and it's a true enabler. Thank you.
Very well said. I think the default is digital. I'm sure Prince wanted to take your view on the space. If you can show some light on it.
So thank you so much, Sumedh, for sharing your perspective. I think a couple of those points actually resonated quite strongly. So first is this whole dichotomy, or the so-called dichotomy between India and Bharat. We love painting the world in two constructs or dualities kind of a thing. but actually it's actually more of a continuum. As Sumedh pointed out, there are actually a million Bharats and a million Indias, so to say. So if I was to come to HR, if I was to come to talent acquisition specifically right now, the way we are looking at it in the agri sector within Mahindra's, we actually are seeing this as an opportunity. Okay, we are seeing this as a silver lining because it's helping us try out, experiment, and scale up a lot of initiatives successfully launched in the past, and we have been able to reap many benefits in doing that. So I'll give you a small example. We were one of the first groups in the country to have implemented SAP. Uh, we are entirely, all our people processes are already digital. That includes talent acquisition as well. Uh, what we also saw, much to our amazement and much to our pleasant surprise, that candidates, especially also in the so-called Bharat part of the country, if somebody wants to use that construct even now, uh, they they are embracing they are embracing digital amazingly well, and they are extremely responsive to the digitalization of people processes that many large corporates as well as other corporates have been embracing, like ours. So you'll be surprised to note that talent acquisition is still going on. Talent acquisition is still happening. Uh, Obviously, in a much more planned manner, in terms of, let's say, in a much more frugal manner, in a much more, you know, uh, cautious manner, in terms of, okay, we see which verticals we require, what kind of exact skill sets, and so on and so forth. So, talent acquisition is happening still. Is it leveraging digital far more? Yes. Is the Bharat part of the country, okay, getting impacted on account of the the challenges of physical mobility? And let's say a lot of my friends were asking, hey, how do you guys manage to acquire talent now? They can't appear for interviews, right? So that's actually not true. That's actually not true. So digitalization has actually changed the entire game. It's no longer a paradigm that we used to kind of look at, okay, physical versus digital and so on and so forth. So it is the starting point. So to say, it is the default now. And that extends, ladies and gentlemen, that extends also for uh, hiring that we are still doing in certain pockets in in the deeper, more remote parts of the country. And in fact, we are leveraging technology big time for that. So that's my take on talent acquisition. And the first part of what I shared about it's an opportunity or a silver lining. Uh, I am sometimes it is my personal observation that many HR professionals tend to overlook the importance on basics, the importance given to basics. Okay, I'll give you an example. Uh, I was at a gathering, and I often love interacting with younger HR professionals who are just about entering the field. And I was surprised to note that the manner and the attitude in which a lot of HR professionals look at, talent acquisition in terms of, let's say, it's just broadly comprising of a series of interviews, okay, with more and more senior people at various levels, right? That's actually not true. There's a lot more that HR professionals can do in terms of improving the rigor of the process, not just looking at digital, by the way, not just looking at digitalizing the process, but also looking at the effectiveness of the process. And that's something that I'll be also talking on. I would love to share more perspectives as we go on in the discussion. So these kind of opportunities, like the current crisis, also give us in the HR fraternity, and I'm personally spending a lot of time in ramping up the rigor of HR processes, especially in talent acquisition also. And I would, for all the HR professionals who are joining in into this discussion, I'm just leaving a thought, I'm just leaving a point for you guys to ponder on, that typically the obsession with efficiency of processes, right? Is it also time to look at also improving the effectiveness of people processes? And these are moments where you have this pause, so to say, where that mad rush, so to say, is essentially slowing down in a certain sense. You get some more time to reflect, and you can get time to reflect to improve the quality of your processes, the rigor of your processes, the efficiency of your processes, and the effectiveness of your processes. And that, by the way, holds true for talent acquisition as well. So to summarize, it's still happening. Talent acquisition is happening. It's not a hiring freeze, so to say. And digital is the default, as my friend also mentioned, very much so. And one should look at the current uh, crisis, so to say, as a silver lining for trying out different stuff to improve the quality and the level of maturity of your processes, especially talent acquisition, since we are on that subject. Ranu,
Perfect.
over to you, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, Prince, as you mentioned, I just wanted to check, and Sumedh, I also would like to take a note from this. We've heard about Alexa. Okay, we've heard about Siri. This is the new digitized, rather the product because of the technology. I just wanted to understand what are the kind of digital tools that we are using right now, from CV searching or gathering the CVs to the entire onboarding process of a candidate. What are the kind of digital tools that we are incorporating at each level? I'm sure there is TCS is also talking about work from home since a while, and it's in the media all over. What kind of digital tools are we using? And Sumedh, I would like to Prince, I would like to understand your view as well once Sumedh speaks on it. Yes, Sumedh, over to you.
Okay, so I think to talk about the digital framework in the talent acquisition, we have to look at it in a very fragmented way. You don't have one single product which addresses the entire supply chain of talent, so to say. So if I have to logically break talent acquisition into five sub-functions as we actually do in TCS, we start with obviously the requirement gathering. A lot of digital interface is used there between the talent acquisition team and the business. Post the requirements are gathered, the next job is to validate those requirements and start sourcing. Now, there are humongous plethora of tools are available in the sourcing space, so to say. Once sourcing is done, obviously the ball moves into something called selection, and there is where again you have a plethora of products and technologies available. Once the selection happens, obviously we'll go ahead with something called an onboarding of those talented folks. And in between the selection and onboarding, there is something called a background check process. At least in IT, that is absolutely important. And there is where also you have a lot of interface with technology. And post onboarding also, when you induct folks into your organization, that space is also all pervasive when it comes to technology. So I to really talk about this entire supply chain as we start mapping from requirement to onboarding. Uh, it is very difficult really to pinpoint one single technology or one single product. For someone like us with our kind of scale, I don't think anyone besides Indian Army actually hires more people than we do globally every single year, year on year. So while Prince has spoken about the efficacy of processes, and which I actually agree to him to a large extent, is that while every single process is digitized and every single process is designed to give a certain throughput, and obviously efficiency is a measure of output to input. What is also important is in doing what am I actually doing is the question that in every talent acquisition professional needs to ask at every single interface, be it at the requirement gathering phase to an onboarding space. So the effectiveness is something besides making numbers is something that should be the key. So efficiency and effectiveness go hand in hand. Why I brought this up again in this discussion, because there are different tools that again will help you, one, achieve your efficiency, and two, measure your effectiveness. So series of the worlds and the likewise products, at least for someone like us, we don't believe in a philosophy of picking products off the shelf then integrating them, because it doesn't work in our kind of an ecosystem. For us, everything is inbuilt in house, and we already have a humongous technology framework implemented to address entire talent acquisition spaces. So if I have to really talk about the requirement gathering space, we have an inbuilt technology which interfaces with the workforce planning tool of TCS and extract requirements which are out focused in terms of hiring from the market. Otherwise, the fulfillment should ideally happen majoritarily through the available folks. Second part is sourcing, obviously, and while there are bots, so to say, and there are creepers, if I may have to also talk about technology aspect, ultimately, what is important is the human element. Candidates still want to be engaged humanly. This means while the operational part of sourcing can happen using technology, you can run certain queries and get a dump of resumes meeting your job description. But what is more important is when you have to really screen and qualify. Again, the operational level screening can also be done using technology, certain eligibility criteria and so on and so forth. The fundamental screening of folks meeting your job description happens by picking up a phone and having that one-to-one conversation. You need to do all of that validation. You need human beings there. And so far, that has not been replaced by any technology, let me assure you. Uh, we obviously also have a set of technology which is inbuilt, by virtue of which we can run a search in a dump of resumes matching to the JD given, so that you have a best fit out of thousands of resumes that you download. That's again homegrown. It gives you the best available possible fit from the talent pool available. That obviously reduces a lot of work which otherwise would have been done manually in most of the industries. But this is a part of efficiency, as I said. The effectiveness of screening happens when the one-to-one interaction happens. Coming into the selection has always been completely digitized for us. Multiple levels of evaluations and reviews, but I will not talk about that because that is it's normal for us. Where we are experimenting on selection is something that we are very gung-ho about and very bullish, is assessment-based hiring. Now, this is a very interesting space for talent acquisition, in my view. Whether you talk about the companies which may categorize themselves serving Bharat, or the companies which categorize themselves serving India, or in the continuum anywhere, we are looking at a talent pool. The manufacturing concept of just in time, which I'm sure Prince can talk a lot about, we have been experimenting with something called making talent available just in time without having to maintain any inventory. And that's a very novel concept in talent acquisition space. And to keep ourselves ready in that particular space, we have been very bullish for some time now on something called assessment-based hiring. And assessment-based hiring actually helps you create a talent pool which is ready to tap in for certain technology stacks by curating the talent using various tools well in advance, and keep that inventory ready. As and when the requirement strikes you, you just take a deep dive into your ready-made pool of folks who are already screened, who are already scanned and ranked as per their competency, maturity on a certain technology stacks, and they are ready to go the moment you press the button. And I think this is a very interesting concept in talent acquisition space. We've been experimenting with this with a concept called just-in-time hiring. It reduces your go-to-market time drastically by almost 90 days, which is massive in IT kind of parlance, to be very, very frank. Next, if I have to move into the onboarding space, since the COVID has happened, we have gone completely virtual. So we are now today onboarding people almost virtually without any physical connects at all, just to ensure the business continuity. And the integration arm also is pretty much virtual. We have a complete roadmap of day 0 till 1 complete year that any new induct in TCS sprints, which is completely virtualized. And there are milestones defined on a quarterly basis, which gets assessed for their effectiveness and whether we are on the right track, and to make the necessary course correction as and when required. So if I have to really say so, at least in the COVID scenario now, we are capturing requirements virtually. We are sourcing virtually, which was always a norm. We are selecting virtually by giving a lot of emphasis on creating just-in-time talent pool. We are onboarding folks virtually, and we are also integrating them virtually. So virtual is real. There is no dichotomy there at all. Virtual is real, and I'm sure that is going to be the new normal, at least in my space. And most of the industries which are currently also hiring, because the calamity has pushed them, they have leveraged on this opportunity. According to me, every calamity is an opportunity too precious to be wasted. Today morning, I received one WhatsApp forward, and I felt it's so relevant to this discussion. What has really pushed digital transformation in your organization is what that forward said. Is it your CEO who is driving the digital transformation? Is it your CTO who is driving the digital transformation? Or is it the COVID which is driving digital transformation? And I think that is a profound WhatsApp forward, and that's the reality, my dear friends.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so well summarized, Sumit. So well summarized. I think you touched almost all the aspects, and the last line, I'm sure, answers a lot of things. The acceptance of digitization has been so well all over the place now. Right? I think I'm sure it reduces all the roadblocks and mental blocks that people had in terms of looking at digitization all over the place. I think lovely. I like the word. The virtual is real. That's actually the case. I'm sure who can explain talent acquisition the better way than TCS HR person can. Prince, I'm sure I just wanted to understand the other spectrum of it, the manufacturing sector and the Bharat part of it on the talent acquisition, because I'm sure what is talked about is the benchmark that IT industry can take up. And I just wanted to understand the your side of it.
Sure. So, couple of interesting points which I wanted to share. One is that, of course, the digitalization of the hiring process is something that has been achieved quite a while back in Mahindras. So right now it's entirely 100% digital, and that includes onboarding and pretty much, so to say, the phrase right now that you see on Zomato, etc., is contactless, right? So it's contactless, so to say. That said, the human touch is still very much intact in terms of communication, frequent, effective communication, though, of course, not in the traditional sense of the physical meetings because of the current crisis. Second is we've successfully experimented and used, and we are reaping the benefits of an outsourced model, a recruitment process outsourcing model that we currently have for most of our prominent sectors, such as the automotive, the farm, and including the agri sector, where I currently belong. And that's working pretty well. Third is that the success factors suite for resourcing and for talent acquisition has given us pretty good results. We are quite satisfied with that. And as you know, it sits very nicely on top of SAP because it's by the same organization. We also are seeing some very interesting positive results if you focus or if you increase your focus on screening, okay, using psychometrics. And let me share a couple of points on this, okay? Because I think for HR professionals who are on this in this discussion, it will be quite interesting. One is to be able to make that segregation and difference in terms of hiring for suitability. hiring for potential, knowing when you're doing what. Sometimes you may need to hire both for suitability for the current role, for which you're immediately hiring, for which you have the, the hiring specs or the JD. Sometimes you may need to not only look at hiring for suitability for that role, but also go beyond in terms of what next. Okay. So I, let's say, want to hire somebody who's very suitable for a given role, but I am keen that this particular role is so much so like a foundational role for roles of higher responsibility. So I would ideally like to hire for potential too, in addition to, of course, suitability. So we have of late been seeing some very positive results in that space, and a couple of tools I can share with you guys if you're interested. You can Google, you can search it out more. One is the Harrison's tool. The Harrison's suite of assessments is something that we are finding quite useful. Uh, the second is the Conferry assessment of potential. Uh, Typically very useful, very effective for senior management. And looking at ability tests for base level hiring is also giving us very good results. And all this, of course, is 100% digitalized. Uh, for some of us who perhaps may not be aware, M&M, especially the auto, farm, and agri sectors, they have consistently been ranked as one of the best places to work in the country. And when we have discussions with the Great Places to Work organization, especially on their feedback on the processes that we basically have, uh, we've received some very good feedback from them as a third party as well as from candidates in terms of the rigor of processes, and which is the point I was making earlier, that rather than looking at everything as in an efficiency based manner, that is, how fast can I get a human body occupying a particular position, right? Typical turnaround time kind of a metric. One should also look at quality. One should also look at quality of hire. And our our experiments in terms of screening of candidates using psychometrics is extremely promising. So for any young HR professionals out there in the audience, it'll be a great idea for you guys to check out the application of psychometrics in a proper manner, of course, because there's always a potential of misuse otherwise, right? In hiring, and that's something which I wanted to share. And of course, hiring for potential versus hiring for suitability, sometimes doing both, and sometimes doing one of the two. So that's the other piece. Digitalization, quite frankly speaking, is now becoming more and more standard. So I don't want to. I don't want to. It's almost like right now coming close to a point of breathing. It's become the standard right now. So, Ranu?
Yeah, thanks, Prince. Thanks for sharing your views. I'm sure you spoke about a couple of models, the RPO model. My next question was, in fact, around it, which gives me some ray of hopes. Uh, I just wanted to check when Sumedh told me specifically looking at automating the analysis and
Your voice
talking
is
about most of
breaking
the
off.
things. I said when Sumedh was speaking, am I better?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Please
I
carry
think
on.
when Sumedh said specifically that they are looking at a lot of processes which are automated and quite a lot of things that they are doing in-house. Separately, Prince said that they have a RPO model which is coming in. There are certain tools on the psychometric side of the business which they are using right now. Just wanted to check specifically, is the human aspect or the human involvement or the role of talent acquisition agencies going to wade off? While I'm sure Sumedh specifically mentioned that the human touch will never go in the entire recruitment process. And if yes, if there is a role that they play, what is the role? What are the kind of minimum expectations that you have from the talent acquisition companies over a period of time?
If I may go first.
Please, Sumedh.
Okay, so I know what I'm going to answer may not necessarily please all of you, but one, when it comes to having partners in the talent acquisition space outside the realm of my own specific team, the vendor utilization is probably all-time low at least for TCS for several years now. We have always believed in having everything in-house. We rarely rely on any tools and technologies which are off the shelf that we usually pick from the market and try and integrate them. In our experience of being an IT company and in a business of giving IT consulting, because this is my bread and butter, it goes strictly against our philosophy for which customers come to us for answers. If I look out those answers outside in the market and can't implement those products internally, then I'm not worth my salt. So, and I think that's a very well-founded philosophy, because I'm a technology company. The whole world looks at me when it comes to looking at technological solutions. So that's part one. Part number two, given to that particular philosophy and adhering to it, for years we have never really uh, had any dependence on any outside technology. As far as talent acquisition landscape is concerned, everything is in-house, and if we have any need, we obviously give those specs, and we have teams which, I mean, I have a team, a dedicated team, which we call talent acquisition digitization team, which caters to all my talent acquisition needs 24/7. And I think I will be probably one of those privileged ones. You have a wish, put it on the shelf, it will be delivered to you in a very scheduled manner, like we run a project for my customers, so to say. And obviously, I have financial sanctions for that. Coming to the vendor partners, it is not that the TCS does not engage with vendor partners in the talent acquisition space. We use them and use them very selectively. Let me put it that way. And we have an industry benchmark, if I have to say so, in the vendor partner utilization. Our vendor partner utilization is 1.5% globally, which can probably break any bench. So I'm not saying a benchmark. It can break any bench given the size of company we are and the kind of numbers that we do every single year. Our
Great.
dependencies on the vendor partners is very, very minimal, for a fact that we always have relied very heavily on the homegrown talent. So I lead a huge talent acquisition team, given my requirements are also very huge, and we cater to 46 countries globally. But as I said, we do engage vendor partners very selectively in a very selective technology space. We leave it to the vendor partners in terms of how pervasive technology aspect is in their own space while they cater to us. My lookout is very, very clear. As long as you cater to me within my schedule and the cost, and obviously the quality, you are a game. If you don't meet that, obviously you always have multiple options to look at. And the third option has been RPO. Among all the processes in HR, I think recruitment is a process which is absolutely a great candidate for digitization, because it's an extremely operational, sequential, and process driven. And that's probably one of the reasons as to why this particular space got digitized extremely extensively over the years. So, yes, uh, we have certain vendors who actually provide us some sort of a consulting state of the art next rung, or what I can say is the emerging stack of technologies which we keep on reviewing time and again just to stay ahead of the curve. We also have certain venture capital funds that the Tata Group itself supports in the startup sector, if I may have to say so. And there are a lot of lovely, interesting, innovative ideas getting experimented in that space, is where we are very, very actively engaged in terms of IPR. The intellectual property rights is what we collectively own in terms of designing products and taking them to the market. May not necessarily we use it in-house, but we may probably take that out in the market as a product, because that is again a part of my business strategy. So a lot of talent acquisition folks work on those projects as the subject matter experts. While I'm talking to you, there are 4 different teams working on some of very innovative products. Some of those purely triggered because of the COVID situation, and worldwide, my customers are asking for some of those products. We decided to put teams together to probably address those, and a couple of those may go off the shelf 2 weeks down the line. I have had a review meeting yesterday about some of those. So talking about whether talent acquisition can also be a revenue stream for a company, we are a classic example of it. While I may not necessarily consume that technology in my current landscape, but I'm absolutely willing to sell that to my customer as part of a revenue stream. So to cut it short, vendor partners are strategically important, as I said, and we have been extremely selective in utilizing them. And if you ask me, what is the future for them? Yes, they really hold a great future, subject to they cater to the philosophy of what we call just-in-time hiring. If they're aligned to my philosophy, we are a game. So that's how I would like to conclude it.
Perfect. I think thanks. I can definitely understand. Super benchmark 1.5% only is a benchmark in the industry, I'm sure. And the best said was when you're creating a product for the industry while you're learning it and trying to implement it in-house. Well done. I'm sure it is so nice to understand that. Prince, wanted to understand your view, Prince. How do you look at vendor partners? While you mentioned about RPOs or the model and the RPOs and psychometric evaluation as well. How are you looking at what are the minimum requisites that you look at from a talent acquisition companies?
See, this particular space is extremely commoditized. Okay, and it's a classic example of a red space, right? It's no longer a white space. So I know this question has a lot of relevance, especially for you, Ranu. so, so let me share a little bit more detail in this. So we definitely do engage with partners. We definitely engage with agencies. But when we are absolutely certain that they provide a certain X factor, they provide a certain value add, they provide a certain differentiator which the other agency, and there's so many of them, which is my first point, that it's a red space. It's become so commoditized that the differentiation between agency A versus agency B is very, very difficult for the agencies to do. Okay. So what we essentially look at is apart from the very standard parameters of cost and time, it's about what's the depth and breadth of understanding of the particular industry vertical, because we are engaged right across the entire value chain of agri, right? As I mentioned, from farm to fork. So basically, right from seeds, so we've got molecular biologists and geneticists, right, who are making seeds, and they are competing against the Monsantos of the world. And then we also have dairy, which we've started off in a small way in Madhya Pradesh. That's going against the Amuls of the world. So now that's a big spectrum of businesses, right across from farm to fork. So in each of these businesses, the depth of expertise, the hold on the talent pool out there, and in this particular aspect, uh, the challenge is even more, because some of that talent may not be very, very sophisticated. They are extremely talented, but they're very not very sophisticated as far as, let's say, in the way we conventionally associate things like, okay, being able to speak fluent English and so on and so forth. So we basically have improved and refined our processes to that extent. And I'm pleased to share with all of you guys that we go beyond those superficialities of language and, whether my hair is combed or not. Of course, I have that benefit because Sumedh and I think both have that benefit because we don't need to do too much of that. But we go beyond that. We go beyond that. So if your pool of talent is so well selected, okay, if you're an agency, suppose for the sake of argument, and your depth and command of the industry itself is extremely high, extremely deep, extremely wide, then you're in the game, because otherwise you will pretty much land up sharing candidates which pretty much we know about already, and it'll be just another Me Too kind of an offering. And there, typically agencies will try to compete on a few percentage points here and there on cost and things like that, right? That's basically table skates. That's as hygiene a factor as it can possibly get. So, if I was to summarize in a line or so, it would be industry depth, the hold of the industry, the hold on the talent pool, and how well do you, or how well can you connect the client's requirements in terms of inciting with the kind of talent labor supply out there, right? The interesting challenge we face, which perhaps you know uh, talented individuals or companies operating with let's say talent operating out of tier A, B cities don't face is that a lot of our talent is also deep in the rural hinterland, right? Where yes, mobile penetration is pretty decent, but sometimes communication becomes a barrier. So we've been able to work out several proprietary processes and techniques by means of which we've been able to successfully work around that. If an agency has access to talented professionals, right, in a niche industry segment, right? Yes, why not? Game on, game on. If not, then it's quite frankly, we there's no dearth of options. There's no dearth of options. Ranu?
Perfect. Perfect.
So
Thanks,
Ranu,
Prince. Thanks.
Ranu, if you allow me, may I?
Yes, Sumedh. Yeah, please.
2 points, a silver lining to a dark cloud, if may you may probably view it this way, and I think Prince has touched based upon that. More often than not, I have found that when my vendor partners come to me with a proposition, is something that my team is already capable of doing, because we have a huge in-house team, which is
Right.
probably the best trained team when it comes to the latest of the technologies and so on and so forth. So they are quite privileged in that sense. All possible privileges available to probably go and hunt the right talent for the company at the right cost in the right time. That being the standard proposition. More often than not, I have found the vendor partners also struggling to procure a talent to me, where my team is also struggling. Now, if both of us are in the same space and in the same boat, and there is no intersection where a vendor partner comes, shakes hand, and tells me, this is a space where Sumedh, where you're really struggling, and I have a great business proposition for you. I can probably help you cover that particular space because I know you're struggling. Now that becomes a very potent candidate for me to look at my vendor partners. And to be very frank, I have rarely come across someone like that. Point number one. And that particular space where I'm really struggling is more often than not the emerging technology stack. IT is an extremely evolving animal. While you can call it an amoeba, it continues to change its face. On an average, every single year, we tend to hire 700 plus different kind of technologies. 700 plus. That's the technology spectrum, which includes the legacy stack of technologies, because I have to serve certain number of my customers who are still working on a legacy stack. And then there are run-of-the-mill technologies as usual. And then something which is called the new growth technologies, the emerging stack of technologies. And that's the space where I definitely need help. I know while you and a lot of your friends are there on this discussion, and hence I wanted to obviously make this business proposition. If you have a business proposition in a space where I really struggle, it's a game. Second thing is, we being an IT company and a services company predominantly, my spectrum of customers that I serve varies from Agri, as what Prince represents, to NGOs on the other spectrum. So I cover the NGOs is non-governmental to governmental to completely commercial to uh, 500 top Fortune companies that we cover, more than 1100 different kind of customers spread across the world. So that means that I'm not only looking at technology per se. Your understanding of technology without the context of an industry knowledge is a real handicap. I don't need people who only understand technology if they don't have an appreciation of the context of technology. And there is where I bring in a lot of domain folks who work with me as a subject matter experts. And that is another area where I really look forward to collaborating with the vendor partners who can get me the right blend. I need people who obviously understand how to deploy a technical solution in, let's say, agri space. So agri space is important a rider there, not the technology, because I have enough of technology folks who can probably serve that particular space, but I may be lacking a person who comes from agri business and got a humongous experience in deploying technology solution there. And that's a point of inflection where we can shake hands.
Good, Sumedh, you give me some opportunity in the entire discussion, and I'm sure from other partners who are also in the panel or also in the audience category here. Uh, Good to know all the perspectives. I just wanted to check on the things. While Sumedh, this would be more relevant to you as well because you spent, and I'm sure I was wanting to put the question in a sense to both of you guys that while we understand there's a requirement for digitization, more Sumedh, because you said that you guys are building a product for the industry simultaneously. Uh, while we are talking about a lot of digitization in the current scenario where people are talking about cost cutting and other aspects, are the industry is the industry actually looking at digitization products, or are they just evaluating the products and looking at the buying decision at abeyance or slightly at a distance for now? What is your view, or what is it you think right now?
I think this is a very, very interesting question and very relevant in the current context. Uh, uh, the general mood across the industry sectors, and I'm not talking about IT per se, every industry sector. See, the pandemic had hit us at different points. Not every industry sector has got badly impacted. Some of them are really prospering because this has been an opportunity for them. And that's why I said that every calamity is a great opportunity to be vested. Some of them are really making money in the calamity. Let's say, for an example, the companies which are involved in consumer products, for an instance. People have hoarded the grains and the consumer items at homes, including you and me, not an exception, because we needed that for our sustenance. I mean, some of the companies who used to provide us some of those stuff actually went out of stock all of a sudden. There was so much of a humongous demand. So why that particular example is that pandemic has also opened a lot of opportunities for some of the sectors. Agri sector will now pick up because the farmers will now start sowing in. They don't have a choice. It is dependent on the weather conditions. The monsoon is coming in. It's a good news for an agri sector. Whether you like it or not, that particular business will pick up. And likewise, there are businesses which are dependent on the seasonal cycles. And we all know that because we are from HR. So given that there is a certain stack of technology, specifically, let's say in e-commerce, the Amazons of the world, Flipkarts of the world, Mahindras of the world are doing humongous business. They are hiring. I mean, the Amazon has recently announced that they would like to hire 50,000 contractual staff. Obviously, the fag and delivery folks, but nonetheless, that is also generating employment. We in IT, some of the companies are still hiring, of course, selectively, but pretty much hiring. We are in the business of hiring. Most of us who have huge dependencies on the campus cycles, and IT is one of those industries which thoroughly thrives on taking the talent at the bottom of the pyramid every single year, because that obviously one helps us shape the pyramid to shape our cost. And third, it gives us an ample opportunity to probably invest and shape up that talent by the time the rubber hits the road. And that's the philosophy. Whether I may cut aggressively on my lateral hiring in tech, I may not necessarily cut at all on my freshers in tech. So we are pretty much in business. So from that perspective, I think technology is something which will be a true enabler. So to answer your question, you have to look at it in two forms. There are industries where transformation is driven by COVID are actually started evaluating products because they have now realized that if default is not technology for them, they may necessarily default on their business models. They may probably go out of business. Unfortunately, that has happened with a lot of companies. Those who have invested well in time, have had technology at their hand, have been doing well, at least still hanging with a small thread, if I may say so. Those who intend to be there as a long-term player, has their pockets filled, are actively searching for right products. So the investments in technology, in my view, will only increase. And for some of us who are matured, so it is again the bifurcation like we do for the rest of the world, the underdeveloped, the developing, underdeveloped. you can also divide the industry maturity in all these spectrums, especially from the technology maturity perspective. So there are certain companies which are under development when it comes to consumption of technology. Certain are developing. They are already on that journey. And some of us who are on the extreme fag end where technology has always been a default, we are better off. So the responses from each one of those categories are different today. But one thing for sure, consumption of technology is going to increase. And whether everyone else is like it or not, it's a good news for me. I'm in that business. Whether it's for the underdeveloped, whether they are wanting to evaluate products now because COVID has forced them to look at, I'm more than willing to give business propositions. I have those on the cloud. As you consume, you pay. Every kind of business model is today available. You don't have to really shell heavily from your pockets. I can customize products for them the way they really like. The developed ones are someone who are like a tier two in the IT probability maturity, who have already tested some sort of success. They have already invested previously. They know it is helping them, and probably it's time for them to go a little more aggressive. These are the organizations who would invest on the shelf products now because they don't have much of time to really catch up and develop in-house something. So they are looking at the products which are ready to go, plug and play. They may probably customize it to some extent to their liking, but these are the organizations who would definitely go off the shelf products. And some companies like us who are on the extreme fag end, wanting to not only leverage that, probably stay ahead of the market, and may probably cull out some of the existing practices and products and put them on the shelf for making a business. So there is no one particular fixed answer. It depends on where exactly you stand as an organization in terms of your technology consumption factor. And accordingly, what suits you, you will take that call. But yes, technology is the stay.
Perfect. I think very interesting
This is
discussion
Prince here.
so far, and I didn't realize we're running out of the time.
Ranu, can you hear me?
Prince, I'm
Hi.
sorry, I'm cutting you here. Yeah, Prince. Yeah, tell me. You had something to
Sure.
say, Prince.
Yeah, so I just
Tell
had
me,
a
Prince.
small comment here. I just had a small comment on the question. I think the key point to remember for all of us is that technology, for the sake of technology, will be very, very disastrous and dangerous. The bigger question for us to look at whether we've not looked at technology as yet in the talent acquisition space, or whether we are hyper looking at leveraging it extensively, is what are the problems of the business or talent acquisition problems that are required to be solved, right? Suppose if technology is the answer, then go for it. Okay, but if technology is not the answer for it, suppose if you have an encyclopedic awareness of the talent over there, then don't jump onto the bandwagon. That is my point over there, because I also see a very risky trend that companies try to emulate each other. Almost, it's like a herd kind of a mentality that ABC company has launched or adopted an ATS, so therefore we should also, rather than assessing your own capabilities very thoroughly, looking at what's the model you're currently using, what are the SWOTs of your current approach, and then seeing what is best for you. So it's essentially technology should follow business and enable business and solve problems rather than tech for tech's sake. Otherwise, you'll have a lot of systems, and I know a lot of people in a lot of other companies, including the IT space, where there are a lot of products which are not being utilized as much. So they've been purchased, invested, but it's an investment that has gone sour. And then after 5, 6 years, you realize that shit, I didn't spend too much of time in evaluating, assessing whether I really wanted this particular product and whether it really solved my talent acquisition challenges or not. So that's the thing. I just wanted to share.
I agree, and I agree to Prince a wonderful perspective. At times, when I speak to Vicky, who runs a HRMS platform and has created some wonderful products like video interviewing, entire induction and entire thing goes onto the cloud and automated. I find it challenging, which Vicky also says the intent at the top has to be there to implement and bring that discipline in using the technology. I keep hearing Vicky saying this multiple times to me. So the intent has to be there at the top to implement because it is to be top driven. And the value has to be understood. Otherwise, it's a herd mentality which he keeps using it multiple times. Very well said. In interest of the time, and we have few questions from the audience. I'll immediately take it to Sunilji. And Mr. Sunil, you can just shoot the questions. Yes, there are some questions from the audience. Yeah, Mr.
Hey,
Sunil,
thanks.
over to you.
Thanks, Ranu. Am I audible?
Absolutely, loud and clear.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from Saili Javle. It says, in terms of AI, how much has the HR fraternity leaned on artificial intelligence? Also, what's your take on AI recruiting assistants? Prince, you would like to take it?
Sure. I think my take is that AI is extremely promising. At the same time, one should not get carried away. My point that I exactly mentioned a little while earlier. Does AI have a promise in revolutionizing or disrupting HR processes? The short answer is yes. But I also would like to add a lot of disclaimers and caveats. If you're by using AI, if you're taking wrong decisions, or if you're taking decisions which are actually make you worse off than where you started off from, then there's a bit of a challenge. So don't jump onto the AI bandwagon just because your neighbor is doing that. Evaluate the pros and cons, right? See whether you really have the maturity, the capability, the intent, the resources, and most importantly, whether it's really required for solving your particular problems that you are currently facing. You may well come to a conclusion that AI is not the answer to the kind of problems you're solving, right? To the kind of problems you are facing. Sorry. So in which case, don't just say, "Hey, AI is the magic bullet. We should all start, jumping onto the AI bandwagon." The second part of your question, robotic assistants are very much in vogue. Okay, but again, are they being able to totally replace where we stand right now? Are they being able to totally replace the human element, which both Sumedh and I talked about? The short answer is right now, no. Okay. Will perhaps that happen in the next couple of years? Why not? Why not? Because it's definitely an exponentially expanding field. So yes, I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thanks. It was an indeed explanation. I have another question from same person, Saili Javle. What's your take on using AI to assess candidates' word choices, speech patterns, and facial expressions to assess his or her fit for the role? Do you see this as being getting into normal? Sumedh, you would like to take?
Okay, so I'll take, I think, some views on the first question. And second question is a corollary to it. So both in a way, bots and AI are being experimented in talent acquisition space for some time now. As Prince has said, you don't have to start taking the pill because it is available over the counter. It should always be preceded with a prescription by a doctor. I would always go that way. While the medicines are available over the counter, you're not supposed to pop the pill. If it suits you, suits your business context and a business problem that you intend to solve, these are the probable solutions. And for an organization to get into bots and AI, one, your technology consumption has to be on a very, very high index. Your technology maturity also has to be very, very high. You just can't simply plug and play the bots and AI. It needs a lot of investment and a lot of technological backup. We have been experimenting with bots and AI for some time now. It's been in the practice, but it doesn't really be an answer saying that whether an AI machine can probably give me a selected candidate tomorrow. I put in a raw candidate from the input side, and AI does something in terms of processing here, and a selected candidate comes out on the other end. That really doesn't happen. So people need to also really have to change their appreciation about what is exactly in AI and what does a bot do. They probably can be a part of a single process where you may want to really utilize these particular technologies. One, for the process efficiency. Two, for the process effectiveness. They come in there. So to answer it in short, AI, yes, being used to assess people. See, there are a lot of experiments which are happening, as I said, with the startups that we do on our technology startup platforms, where very innovative ideas are actually getting really experimented. Last week, I was in a review wherein a gentleman came out with a dot technology, is what they call. There are certain they have divided human beings and the profiling on humans into 12 different categories, and they have created one single dot matrix representing one category, and these 12 categories are mapped to the predominant roles that get hired in the technologies and industries across various roles. A normal person looks at a screen, clicks one particular pattern, and clicks on it. That particular pattern. May I request those who are not speaking to go on mute, please? Thank you. That particular pattern that you select actually gives you 90% of the match to a probable role that you want to hire. It's a very advanced version of AI. We are actually experimenting it, very, very frank. We generally do that from a two perspective. As I said, I may not necessarily utilize it in my talent acquisition space now, but this helps me develop a product in that particular category, which may go off the shelf. So yes, bots are being used. We as a company have already started using bots. One is the sourcing space, two in the selection space, and three in the onboarding space. These bots actually help you to engage with the probable candidates. They at times also help you screen the candidates to a large extent. But ultimately, as I said, I would definitely not like to take away the human touch of face-to-face connect or a telephonic connect to ultimately decide whether a particular candidate is the best fit to a given available job description. One. So that particular human touch will pretty much remain. AI, yes, we are also experimenting AI a lot in the selection space, and that too in the hiring that I talked about, where I wanting to create a talent pool ready for just-in-time hiring. That is a space where we are actually currently experimenting with AI. But as I said, again, a disclaimer very clear: bots and AI are not for everyone. Unless you are there with that kind of maturity in terms of technology aspect, I won't really prescribe AI or bots for everyone because they are available in the market. It should be contextualized to a business problem that you have in hand.
Just taking your question, your answer. I think you have given a good elaboration. This is an extension to what you have just spoken. You mentioned that you are already using bots in some of the space in sourcing and onboarding. So, what is the kind of advantage or difference did you see than what you were using it, the way you are doing it previously and the way you are doing it through bots now? What advantages, what savings did you find, and was it definitely it was efficient way of doing things, or what it was?
Okay, so on two parameters that I generally evaluate the effectiveness of a bot. One is it definitely helps me cut short the time. Very, very important. And bots can work 24/7. I can't deploy human beings 24/7 on the job. So with the philosophy of being available anytime, anywhere in the world is where technology will come handy for you. Someone can work for you when you are at sleep. That's what technology can help you do. And it can also help you work across all time zones, across the countries. So if you want to deploy a solution which is 24/7, all pervasive across all geographies, what is a technology which can still continue to engage with your talent pool while you are at sleep? Who will not really like to do that? So that's very clear advantage. One. Number two, bots also help you improve your talent engagement index with your probable talent. That's the second measure that I would definitely like to have. You want to have a very engaged talent pool wanting to be interested in you. You have to keep that particular interest all the time high. So that's second area. Third area is where they help you answer run-of-the-mill regular questions that any new candidate may really have, be it related to a job, be it related to a current specific role, be it related to your organization. Some of those run-of-the-mill regular questions can be directly answered by the bots, where you really don't need human intervention. So there is where you can also cut short on your headcount. So saves you time, saves you cost, saves you a lot of headcount, which you do not want to really engage in purely operational stuff, purely answering queries. There is where bots will really help you. And as I said, they are also be able to work 24 by 7 all across without the boundaries of the countries or the boundaries of the time zones. So there is where they also help you do that. There are a lot of advantage in deploying those if you really deploy those in a very intelligent way.
Fine. Thanks. I have next question, CA Nilesh. Okay. His question is, AI will be implemented heavily in the HR field. Will it be disruptive, and what kind of disruption it will bring in this talent acquisition field? Prince, would you like to take this?
Uh, so AI, in the interest of time, let me try to be brief and concise. AI will most definitely be disrupting the HR space. It's already started to do that, okay, which I'm sure you would have figured out by now. Uh, it'll be, however, a positive disruption. It'll not be a negative one as much as it will be a positive one. It'll actually enhance the value that the HR function can provide. In other words, evidence based HR, which so far used to often be looked at as an oxymoron, that okay, the general perception amongst many line managers once upon a time used to be that okay, there's not much evidence in HR. It's all very, very touchy feely. But with AI coming more and more into HR, the whole aspect of evidence based people related decision making or evidence based HR in short will go up. That will improve the value that HR professionals like all of us, and including the person who's asked this question, the way he or she will be evaluated and looked upon by the business. Second is, I had a very brief point to make on one of the earlier questions raised about, AI-based facial recognition based talent acquisition technologies. So in Mahindra, we experiment with and we evaluate all such emerging technologies very, very often. As former head of talent acquisition, in the last 2 years, I have personally been assessing 2 to 3 such technologies, and I would offer a word of caution to people who would like to jump onto the bandwagon of facial recognition based talent acquisition without doing a very thorough check in terms of the convergent validity of what is coming out from the AI system versus what other tools, which perhaps are taking more effort and more time, as well as your own judgment of the candidates, okay, and the own intrinsic wisdom of the line managers. What is that revealing? I would urge caution before one just supports the AI facial recognition based software technologies that are promising a lot. But quite frankly, if all of you, I'm sure you would be reading the news, in the last 6 to 12 months, max to max, there was a very interesting study, I think, done in MIT, which indicated by one of the world's leading experts on AI, where it came out very clearly. The gentleman said that a lot of these offerings, which are claiming to be miraculous magic bullets in terms of being able to tell you with surprising degree of accuracy about what is the fit, just because just based on the words I use in my LinkedIn profile, or based on the words I use in Facebook, or the words I use in my CV, and my facial expression. They will be able to tell me whether I'll make a good HR head or not. Uh, there is a lot of criticism as well. So my friends, please trust but verify. Trust but verify. Okay, that's
Okay.
my one request. Thank you, Sunil.
Thanks, Prince. I have another question from MA Walwalkar. Okay. The question is like this: are psychometric tests and assessments used for building high performance team? Is anyone leveraging this? Maybe this can be a script, brief one as an answer, because there's another follow up question on that. Anyone you would like to take this?
I didn't catch the question, Sunilji, very quickly. Can you repeat that?
Are psychometric tests and assessments used for building high performance team?
So is yes.
Okay. Next question is objectives and key results as a performance management assessment. Are they being used by the industry leaders? There is a question again from Ame.
Sumedh, any views?
Well, why not is the question, because how else would you really assess people's performance? You have to obviously assess their performance basis certain objectives. If the objectives are not aligned through their goals, there is no fair way of really assessing the performance. So I think that's the way. You may call it under any name, so to say. Gone are the days of the curves. The curve is dead and long gone, and blah blah blah. While those are the trendy, what can I say, trendy catch lines, if I may have to really say so. The curve was never dead. It can't be. That's the reality. The curves will exist one form or the others. If you ask me my personal view, curves are the one which actually make your life beautiful. Curves should always be there. They may change shape and forms. They may get administered in different ways, but they will still remain. So one, performance appraisals and the management systems are all pervasive in various forms and shapes. So is the normalization and rationalizations in various forms and the shapes. You may probably call it anything, disguise it under anything, but those are going to stay. That's my take.
Okay, thanks. We have next question for coming from Vicky himself. Vicky, would you like to put it from your end?
Sure, thank you. So, Sumit, this is for you. You mentioned about just-in-time talent acquisition. Very nice concept. I just wanted to know, of course, for a company like TCS, it makes a lot of sense because you do a lot of hiring, and people would be, more than happy to maybe switch from their current, or even if they have got a job, they would want to join TCS for sure. How do you see this in a, this getting implemented in a growing company or the SME space, where the number of companies are huge, but the size of those companies are pretty small? Do you think just in time talent can make sense over there?
Okay. So again, every concept has to be customized to your own industry context, my dear friends. That's the first disclaimer that I would give. What I do may not necessarily fit you or suit you. I do that because I have a business need to do that. And two, I actually hire the kind of numbers that no one else does. Three, I rarely been given time from my business side to onboard a talent. See, the way IT works in a typical business model by virtue of which you win a project, you are supposed to staff it in a particular timeline, and then you are supposed to also deliver in a particular timeline. And then that particular project is over, done and dusted, you move on to something else. That's the typical business model in which IT works. This business model is not all pervasive in all other kind of industries. To do that, I'm constantly evaluating all possible talent, because you really never know when a particular project will be won by us and when I will get a request of a huge ramp up in a very short span of time. please understand, for me, the billing starts happening the moment rubber hits the road. And in IT, the way billing happens is by the person hours. That is one of the primary criteria, but there are different models of really revenue recognition. One could be a fixed time, second could be a person dependent time and material, so to say. But the way we actually bill our customer is how many person hours an individual spend delivering a particular product. So if that is the mechanism to revenue recognition, it is imperative for me to have talent onboarded ASAP. Because the moment the person is there, my billing starts. If I don't have an individual with a particular technology stack or a competency that I'm needing from a domain knowledge and so on and so forth, my billing will not start. And now all industries may not necessarily operate in that particular model. So you need to first understand what is the business you are into. And if your HR solutions are not catering to your business model, then you are irrelevant. Point number one. Point number two, can just-in-time hiring model be replicable to rest of the industries? In my mind, why not? It really doesn't matter whether you are really hiring a high-end, huge numbers and so on and so forth. You can always have a talent pool ready for you to join at the press of a button, subject to you have certain level of predictability in terms of your talent acquisition needs. One, you have a wherewithal to really engage that assess talent. Two, and number three, you also have processes and system in place to convert that talent pool into an employee space at a click of a button. If you do not have all these things, then it doesn't suit you. You need to first create an ecosystem, and that ecosystem which is aligned to your business model, then this particular solution will probably fit you. This is my personal opinion. We may vary on this, but if you ask me, just in time is for everyone. If you ask me, yes, it is. It is for everyone. It depends on how you really customize it to your context.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Sumedh. I have last two questions coming up. So the first one is question from Aditi Datta. She is HR head of an organization. Her question is, what are the risks on over depending on technology?
I think Prince has touched based upon it. I won't say that I'm also not qualified to really make a comment. While I eat technology, I sleep technology, and I probably technology. So I'm a technology company, so I can probably may not necessarily say, but this, yes, too much of something is bad enough. That's the bottom line. Unless and until you are catering to a real life business problem where technology is an enabler to a solution, there is where technology aspect comes. Whether it's a business problem or whether it's an issue in the HR space. And in particular, now we are today talking about talent acquisition. So if you have an issue or a problem which can be catered to by technology, then you are the right candidate. Otherwise, technology for the sake of technology, because you probably have deep pockets and intend to invest without really uh, seeing the end, whether it's serving the objective, is something that I will not prescribe. Part number one. Part number two, automation is a good candidature for all those processes, be it a business process or an HR process. If it is repetitive, time consuming, and headcount consuming. If you have a candidate like that in your process ecosystem, my suggestion, please go for it. Don't engage headcount unnecessarily because it is not value generating. You can utilize that headcount somewhere else where you can really, really create a value. Rest all, you leave it to technology because technology is just an enabler. Utilize it effectively to solve your business problems. Utilize your headcount there where you think we, being a human resource professionals, can create value which probably technology can't create. That's the bottom line. for approaching these kind of situations.
Thanks, Sumedh. I think very well explained. One last question, which is coming from Vishal Kothari. Okay, what will be the state of unorganized sector hiring? How will they cope up with this post-COVID era? Now that a lot of migrants have left the cities and they have gone back, so how will post-COVID era, and how will technology be of any help in this sector? Prince, you would like to take this?
Sure. A very, very interesting question, and thank you for raising this question. Very pertinent right now, given the situation that we are facing. I think technology will definitely help in addressing this challenge. The challenge will become more acute in the months to come because there's a lot of unplanned uh, movement of labor, which was not anticipated at this scale by the administration, by organizations, and by even people themselves. So definitely in terms of talent supply, the supply of talent in the kind of frequency, time, quality, and other parameters that we normally have been expected to, uh, you know, uh, we've been accustomed to in the past, it has definitely been impacted to a certain extent, and you would be seeing a lot of news coverage on that of late. I see that problem even more acute when it comes to unorganized sector, like you have pointed out in your question. Where technology will help is in helping once again find that talent which earlier was much more readily available, much more readily accessible. But now, in the next couple of months, the accessibility and availability of that talent will become a little bit more difficult. So, given that increased difficulty, technology will act as a bridge, right? And in a way, it'll to kind of link up with the topic of this entire discussion. It'll act as a so-called bridge between the so-called divide between India and Bharat, right? And it'll help our businesses become more resilient. It'll help our businesses become more immune to the major disruption caused on account of the current crisis. And in short, it will also help us leverage and exploit the underlying opportunities or silver linings that in this particular crisis also one can see. So that's my take on this entire thing.
Thanks, Prince. Okay, so it was a very quite informative session and quite elaborate. Okay, Ranu.
Yeah, thanks, Melji. Thanks, Prince, and thanks, Sumedh, for your sharing all your views on the industry. Quite relevant. I'm sure one thing which comes out is the default is digital, which was something thought 7 years back by one of the leading IT firms, and certain aspects which you spoke about, so Prince, very relevant to the other part of the industry, which talks about a contrary view that take a decision on spending on technology, provided it makes the need of the hour and solves the problem. It should not be the mad rush to enter into the technology. Right. Thanks a lot. We have certain requests coming in. A lot of our audience and WhatsApp messages have come in to repeat a similar kind of a session once again, which clearly shows that it's been quite apt in terms of the topic that we wanted to cover. Thanks once again for your time. Thanks, Sumedh. Thanks on behalf of Acura Solutions, ACE Human Capital Ltd, and uKnowva for being a wonderful audience, guys. Thanks a lot. And keep
Thank you
watching the
so much,
space. We'll
everybody.
be once
Thank you.
again with
Thank
some
you.
very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so much for having us. Bye bye. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks,
Stay
Sumedh.
safe.
Thanks,
Stay
Prince.
safe. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hi, Vicky.
Sorry. So I think we're through. I'll end the meeting. and the recording, etc. We can take up.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Vicky.
Bye.
Thanks, Sunil.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ganesh.